Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. This is Multifamily Chronicles, episode number 28. With me today, I have Dan Simpkins. Dan is the founder and CEO of Dwellwell Analytics. Welcome to the show, Dan.
Thank you very much for having me, Adrian. I'm glad to be here.
Dan, why don't we start by you telling the audience a little bit about yourself, about your background, personal, professional, and where you are today, and what are the great things that you do at Dwellwell.
Great. Well, I appreciate you giving me the time to give a little bit of my background. I have an entrepreneurial upbringing. Turns out my grandfather was an entrepreneur early as an immigrant to the country in the early part of the 20th century. My father took over that business. I actually helped my dad throughout the course of his career working in his retail businesses. I really got a spark for entrepreneurship from he and my grandfather. But it turns out, rather than go directly into business, I started my career as an electrical engineer. I have a undergraduate and graduate degree in electrical engineering. And early in my career, I became an expert in wide area networking, just as the internet was being created. Really fantastic timing. So I leveraged that expertise to start my first company, which was called SALIX. We could talk more about that later if you like. Throughout the course of my career, I've now had the chance to create three companies: SALIX, Hillcrest Labs, and now Dwellwell. On the personal side, it turns out I have a great family. I'm married to a wonderful woman without whom I could not have been an entrepreneur for 30 plus years. I have a daughter who is grown and lives in New York City, and she's it's wonderful because she's actually a UX designer for Dwellwell, and so that really is it's been a great experience working with her. In terms of Dwellwell, I think we could go into a lot of depth about Dwellwell, but I have a beach house on the eastern shore of Maryland, and a number of years ago, that house flooded as a result of two frozen pipes that thawed, and the house was largely destroyed. As a matter of fact, we got a call one day from our housekeeper that she arrived at the house and water was flowing out the front door. And that's not a good day when that happens. So after spending an enormous amount of time, about a year with my wife and I putting the house back together again, I actually made an interesting observation, that there are 100 million cars on the road or plus today, and all of them have a check engine light that actually tells you what's going wrong before you get stuck on the side of the road. And of the hundreds of millions of homes, none of them have a check engine light today. And so I actually had this idea of creating the check engine light for residential properties.
That's quite intriguing. We're gonna get to that part in just a minute. I do wanted to ask you, I'm very fascinated by creative minds, inventors, and also founders. Dan, I wanted to ask you, what does it take to be a successful founder, to found companies, to get them off the ground, to get them up and running, and actually, get them to turn profit and, develop, great products?
Yeah, we could, Adrian, probably take the next hour to talk about that. But I want to touch on some key points. The first one is you have to have a purpose for what you're doing. You don't want to build a company if the juice isn't worth the squeeze, if you will. And so early in my career, actually after successfully selling my first company, I actually developed a course for business students called the 10 Laws of the Entrepreneur, where I had basically over the course of a decade or more as an entrepreneur, really learned a number of key traits about what it takes to be a great founder. And my second law actually says the following, that you have to start with a great idea, you have to match it to core competency, and you have to be able to implement in the market window. So that's kind of the essence. I call it Startup 101, really the essence. And that um, and so that second part is really critical, because frankly, the first part, start with a great idea. And if we get to it, I'd love to talk about how I created the idea for my second company if at some point during this discussion, because I think it'll speak a little bit to that other part of, but typically ideas are in some ways easier to come up with. But in order to make a great startup, you have to take that idea and you really have to build a team with core competency around it. I know lots of folks, they start startups, they ask their friends to join them or people they've worked with in the past. But frankly, what's really important is to make sure that you have great people around the table, and not only people that you know can implement the product idea, but people who are willing to tell you things you don't want to hear, people who are willing to challenge you. In order to be a great founder, you have to, you actually have to be willing to change directions. And frankly, one of the things that I like to talk about is the idea of having a plan B. The other thing that a great founder needs to have is grit and perseverance. Grit and perseverance. No startup is easy, period. I don't care how many years of experience, how many times you've done it. Every startup has its own challenges. So it takes grit and perseverance sprinkled with some luck. And interestingly, we're talking about the real estate world today. So a great real estate developer, Trammell Crow, once said when asked, "So what is luck?" You know, and he responded without missing a beat, "It's where preparation meets opportunity." And so for me, when I'm running my startups, I always tell my team, make sure you have a plan B. Make sure that you know, have a way of moving the ship, of basically redirecting the ship when something you're doing isn't working. And so from my message to people who want to be a founder, I like to say it's actually easy to create a company today. There are all the tools, there are lots of lawyers. It's pretty easy to create a company, but it's wickedly hard to make it work and succeed, to ultimately build it to scale. And so, you know, it's one of those things that you have to really want to do.
Then one of the things that you really caught my attention in your biography is that you have been not only a serial entrepreneur, but you also been an inventor. You have over 20 patents in US. What does it take to become an inventor? I just speak from outside, and from outside, everybody has the $1 million idea. And everybody, I mean, I'm seeing these people looking at a product, and a lot of times, hey, you know, I thought about this like 20 years ago. Like, okay, well, maybe you really did. But if all you did was to just think about it, and you haven't passed that point, like it's not gonna mean anything. A lot of people live with, you know, a lot of $1 million dollar ideas, but they never go to action. So back to my question, I wanted to ask you if you could share with us what does it take to be an inventor, and a serial one for that matter.
Yeah. So after I told you a little bit about after the startup creating my B school course, which was called the 10 Laws of the Entrepreneur, and one of those laws I mentioned one of the laws relating to the business, but one of those laws says you have to go over the line to see the line. And this is really important if you're going to be a successful inventor. You know, I'll call it founder inventor. And you said it really well, Adrian, this idea of taking an idea, but actually then taking it through action. And so the first thing you have to do is you have to imagine where that line, that boundary line is between reality and science fiction. And you then have to place yourself into the world of science fiction in order to invent something that really it hasn't been invented before. In order to ultimately secure a patent, you have to be the first to actually bring to practice one of those ideas. And this idea of just coming up with an idea isn't enough. To get a patent, you actually have to go make it. You have to make it happen. And so this idea of going over the line to see the line really has a lot to do with putting yourself in the world of science fiction, taking that idea and then turning around and seeing, okay, where is the line between reality and science fiction, and seeing how far can I move that line forward. And frankly, then the key is to start to think about how can I use my expertise to create that idea, which is science fiction, and build it into something meaningful. And so it's one of the things that I think was really important for me is always working in domains that I found interesting, that I had expertise in, but also that my teams had deep expertise in, where by feeding them ideas that were in science fiction, we could then put our collective knowledge together to move that line forward and implement those ideas. Sometimes you implement idea and it turns out you go file a patent and you find out someone else actually already beat you to it, right? And that certainly happens. But what we found throughout the course of my career is by picking ideas that no one else has done, I was able to then secure patents because the teams built things that were really at the forefront of technology.
I couldn't think of something more fascinating than this, and the way you explained it, pushing that line. I love how you push that line, reality and science fiction, and then you push the reality up. You basically expand the reality, right?
That's
In a way, you're expanding it, and that's a beautiful thing. It's such a great way to just kind of to picture everything.
Right.
So then you mentioned earlier that you would like to talk about your second startup, Hillcrest, and Hillcrest Labs has created the first Mark TV operating system and developed the first motion controller for television. So that right there is something that I'm very intrigued by. So I'll let you have the floor. Just tell us a little bit about the company, and tell us a little bit about these products, and how did you come up with the idea? How did you come up? How did you build this product?
Yeah, this is a great question, and obviously I don't want to take the whole time on this, but let me give you a good framework, because it was a lot of fun. The .com bubble had collapsed after the sale of my first company, which occurred in around 2000. As you know, that there was a bubble. It collapsed, and with it collapsed the telecom industry as well, because a lot of the telecom innovation was going into building the internet. And so after the acquirer of my first company decided to scale back those internet-related activities, which was a big mistake, but they did anyway, my management team approached me and asked me to start another company. And I said, look, that's great, but I'm not going to build Son of SALIX, my first company. I'm not just going to build the next, evolution of it. And so, as I said, repeating sort of that second law of entrepreneurship, you have to have a great idea. You have to match it with core competency. So what we did was we started with core competency. We hired the superstar team from my first company, as well as some other folks. We brought a group of people together, about a dozen people, and we had a management team, and then we had the rest of the company. And so the managers, we actually did something extraordinarily unusual. And this really is one of those things that you'll start to see, that in order to invent things, in order to move that line of reality forward, you really have to approach it differently. And so we created a mini university. We literally created a mini university. We took the leadership team, we made them the professors, and we took the rest of the company, and they were the grad students. We created about 50 different classes, everything from the history of telecommunications to the mathematics of cryptography, and a whole lot of other different dimensions. And frankly, these were areas that the team was interested in. The the company created this curriculum. In the process, we produced about 50 different classes. The classes generally ran just like a university class, a few months. We produced over 10,000 PowerPoint slides to back up those classes. It was quite an experience, and it occurred over the course of about 15 months. And every few weeks we'd stop and we'd pause, we'd get some pizzas, we'd have lunch, and we'd talk, what problems? And I'd ask the team, what problems have you found? What ideas have been generated or evolved from these classes? And in the process, people started to think about different problems that they saw possible solutions for. Over the course of this 15 months, we came up with about a dozen different ideas. And one of them, and many of these ideas evolved from looking at trends. So that's, in order to move that reality line forward, you have to know where the world is going. You can't just sort of, it can't be pure science fiction. You have to obviously have a path. And so you look for trends. And one of the trends we saw was that if the internet now could carry voice, which is what we had done previously at SALIX, what would happen when the internet carried video, which didn't exist at the time? There was no YouTube, there was nothing. The internet was basically text and now audio. And so we knew that when the internet carried video, the amount of content would explode, and there would need to be a mechanism to manage all of that content. And so we came up with the idea of blending, basically building an OS for television, which would blend broadcast content, broadband or internet content, which we now call streaming content, and personal media, photos, music, all in one platform. And with it became the birth of smart TV. It was so new, it was so unique, that over the course of a dozen plus years, Hillcrest filed over 400 patents for that technology. One of the key patents involved motion control. Steve Jobs had brought the mouse to the computer, right? Later, he brought pointing, right, which is similar to a mouse, pointing to the phone, but no one had brought pointing to the television until Hillcrest came up with the idea of an OS that used a mouse for the remote control. And that's how it came about.
How long ago did your invention over there at Hillcrest became commercial? So in other words, what year did this hit the product, the final customer? How long ago was the customer able to find your product in a TV?
Yeah,
I can't remember the year. I know that they've been around for a number of years, but I don't.
Yeah, so 2008, we launched the product in 2008. There was an interesting situation that occurred. There were some companies that tried to copy our technology, which led to some lawsuits, which we won't get into. But ultimately, one of those companies that tried to copy our technology was LG Electronics, and they copied it. Ultimately, they didn't do as good a job as we had done. And in the process of approaching us and asking us to license some of our patents for their product, we wound up inking a business deal where Hillcrest delivered much of its technology, not all of it, but a large amount of its technology to LG. And today, every LG smart TV is based on Hillcrest's platform. So LG first launched their smart TV in the winter of 2009. And it took several years before they ultimately incorporated all of our technology, or a lot of it. And today, the LG smart TVs have a significant part of what Hillcrest developed incorporated in those televisions.
Pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. I'm fascinated by the story. Then I want to fast forward a little bit, maybe more than a little bit. Just I want to fast forward to today. Today you are leading the team that created Dwellwell. I'd like for you to talk to just tell the audience a little bit about this product, about Dwellwell, and also speak. A lot of my audience is multifamily, so
Okay.
speak how would your speak about the applicability of your product into single family and multifamily dwellings.
Certainly. And let's do this in layers. What I might do is let me start, and then you might want to take it in a little bit of a different direction. But I gave you the origin story when we first started, that we had this frozen pipe that ultimately led to damage in my beach house. That created the concept of a check engine light for homes. But if we think about what is a check engine light for a car, it is a sensor system that is distributed throughout the car to monitor major systems. And so that is indeed what we did, was to create a sensor system that would monitor major systems. We know, so why do that? Why do we even care? Well, part of the challenge is that maintenance is expensive. And frankly, post-pandemic, the cost of maintenance is going up pretty dramatically. Supply chain is limiting our ability to get parts, to repair things, right? It's replacing an appliance is an expensive process. Labor is much more limited. And so when we first started we first conceived of this idea, we went to the marketplace looking for investors. And interestingly, one of the first investors that I approached, target investor, was the president of a multifamily owner-operator. And in the process of explaining what the product was, which was this idea of a check engine light for residential homes, he said to me, Dan, I want to become your first customer. This has the potential to be a game changer. So I don't want to invest, I actually want to buy. And frankly, for an entrepreneur, that's music to your ears, because clearly, if you've arrived at somebody who has a need and they're telling you they want to buy before you've even created the product, you're onto something. So we actually started to really unpack the problem of maintenance. Right, maintenance today, the residential maintenance overall costs over $80 billion in the U.S. It is going up extensively. It turns out, interestingly, the head of one of the largest multifamily operators in the country today is actually also one of our investors, a different person who said, Dan, my maintenance costs are going up 5 to 8% a year, unbounded, unchecked, and I can't do anything about it. And so the idea behind Dwellwell was to create a plug and play solution that covers the whole building, the whole home. And as when we first started, we conceived of it for single family homes. But when Robert basically asked me that question of, hey, how do I become your first customer? I started to realize that the problem was just as acute in the multifamily space as in the single family. Even though there's a superintendent, a maintenance manager for the building, you don't really know what's going on behind the doors until a resident calls and complains or sends in a ticket, right? And so the idea was to distribute sensors throughout the building in an unusual way, unlike other products that are out there, to collect the data, to really transform the maintenance process with data, and transform maintenance from a reactive process to a proactive one, even eventually predictive.
It's fascinating because while you were talking, the first thing that came to mind while you were describing how things happen, the word reactive came to my mind, and I second that. I've been in multifamily 19 years, and I've seen that we mostly do things the reactive way. In other words, preventive maintenance is not really seen as a focus. And because of that, we had to do so much so much reactive. We have to actually react to things that are coming at us, and it's not a good position to be in. A successful team, a winning team, has to play, offense. They had to have their offense game, and being in a reactive mode is not the offensive way. You will always play defense, and that's not a good spot to be in. Now,
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you next, Dan. Do you see that the multifamily or the real residential real estate in general being very reluctant on adapting new technology and automation? Do you see that trend? And then if you do see it, why do you think that is?
Yeah. I think the thing we think about is the reluctance comes from two places. So I think I'd like to characterize it not as much as reluctance as skeptical, right? I think the operators are skeptical of technology, and there are a few reasons for that. One is that typically operators in the real estate world are not steeped in technology. They're, when in my first company, SALIX, which built voice over IP switching equipment, we were engineers selling technology to engineers, to technologists, right? And so they understood technology, and they were able to, they knew how to incorporate new technologies into their business practices. In the real estate world, in the world you're living in, right? The operators don't have as much experience incorporating technologies into their business practices. So it's not that they don't want to, it's they don't yet know how to. And that's part of what our job is to help them do that. And part of the reason they are also skeptical is that smart home technology in general hasn't really lived up to the hype. That there's a reason why the IoT hasn't yet really caught on. Yes, there are millions of products out there in different applications, but you don't see as much of an integrated platform as the one we're using right now on our computers, right? With all these different services coming together, because there are standards that make the integration of these technologies easier. We are starting to see standards emerge in the IoT, like Matter, for example, but it's going to take some time before the skeptical operators in the real estate world kind of catch up, where they can really see the value, the economic value. So remember, real estate, after all, it's a financial business, right? If you can't bring in more money than you spend, right, which is classic in all businesses, then you don't have a profitable business. And in particular, what real estate operators want to do is not only do they want to make money, on their P&L, but they also want to increase the value of their assets, right? And so that's one of the most important things why we think what we're doing at Dwellwell is a game changer, is because the message we're giving to the operators, especially the multifamily operators, is we're protecting your assets. We're effectively becoming a virtual super. So we're going to give your teams tools to make them more efficient and therefore reduce your costs and ultimately increase your profitability. And by doing that, if we do that well, and we find the early adopters, those within the community that understand or can appreciate the value of those new technologies, that's how we'll be successful.
Then one of the challenges that I've seen for all the vendors that are trying to sell products or services to multifamily is that there's not enough available data to base their sales approach on data and say, okay, KPI, however you want to call it, but it's data, it's numbers. It's a great thing to tell a story and say, this is gonna change your life. It's gonna make you, help you generate higher high profits and everything. But then if you're not able to come up with some numbers, if the numbers are not there, like you said, this is a financial business. So when you're trying to sell to operators, multifamily operators, you're talking to numbers people. And if you're not able to tell the story in a way that it's quantifiable, then it makes it really hard for them to adopt and say, hey, we're gonna take the chance with this product. I had a personal example. Well, I had many examples to where the best that I could get from a vendor that was trying to sell a product to me when I was in property management on a management side was that we have customers testimonials. I said, okay, well, let's say you are selling training. So then I said, I want you to show me some numbers. I want you to show me some numbers. They're showing like, we trained this person for 6 months or a year or 3 months, and then they were at point A, and then now they're at point B. Show me how their performance increased. Why should I spend the money on training? And I could never get numbers. All I could get, the most that I could get was we have, people are so happy, and we have customer testimonials. Now, not to say that your product, might not be great, but in order for me to embrace and to say like, this is the product, like I really need this, like show me some numbers. So do you see that as being an issue then? And then do you have ways to overcome this challenge?
Yeah. Well, let's start with data. There is really a data problem, especially in the repair and maintenance world. The operators, the owners and operators don't have the data. In many cases, they don't know how to connect the maintenance tickets to their P&L, to their actual operating expenses. They literally can't separate out and say, this ticket costs this amount. So oddly enough, for us to generate KPIs and returns is a very difficult challenge when our customers themselves don't know the answer. So the starting point is that data is there is a real dearth of data, and we are hopefully helping them do that. What we've done is we've gone to some operators and we've actually asked them. We've said to them, look, give us your maintenance tickets. Literally just give them to us, and let us look at your financial data. What do you have? And let us then try to show you how this product will change your the economics of your R&M function. So we have we've actually done that with a few of our customers. We've done that with a multiple multifamily customers. We've done that with single family. Those that are willing and able to give us the data. And so what we found is that there are a number of ways that we can show a return on investment. One of the most important is converting unscheduled maintenance to scheduled maintenance. Turns out unscheduled maintenance is substantially more expensive than scheduled maintenance. The classic, and I think you smile, but a tenant calls, it's Saturday afternoon and says, it's hot in here, right? It's hot in my house. It's hot in my apartment. And now it's after hours. You have to pay extra. You may not have people to actually access, or who you can access to do the repair. And also getting parts may be more difficult, right? And so the cost, typically we see the cost of unscheduled maintenance to be 2 to 5 times as expensive as scheduled maintenance. And so if you have data to tell you when something is going wrong, the refrigerant is low in a heat pump, right? Or a toilet is running, or there's a dripping in an apartment, and you can actually service that before it becomes a significant issue, and you could service it during normal business hours. That's significant savings. We also are looking to help you save on utilities. If we can make your HVAC systems more efficient, if we can point to those units that are not efficient, if we can tell you that there are problems that might affect the performance, if we can even tell you, so here's a perfect example. You often have in both the single family and the multifamily, we've seen this example, that a resident maybe is paying for utilities, right? So that they're paying for utilities, whether it's a multifamily that's sub-metered, garden style, or a single family rental. And so the resident goes, Atlanta is a great example. Very hot in the summertime. It's hot right now, right? So a resident goes to work and turns off the air conditioner, says, why am I going to spend money on air conditioning when I'm away? And they come home and they turn on the air conditioner, but it's very hot. And it takes hours for that air conditioner to catch up. And so they call and complain and say it's hot. Or they may have forgotten to turn it on and they'll call and complain. And so one of the things that our system will do is give the operations teams knowledge that, hey, you're turning off the air conditioner during the heat of day. Maybe instead of turning it off, you should just turn it down a little bit, turn it down a few degrees. You'll actually ultimately save more because you won't have to crank it up as hard and stress the system when you come home at the end of the day. Also, there is, so resident satisfaction. When you do a better job at R&M, you have better resident satisfaction. So there are many ways that so better resident satisfaction, fewer turns, less churn, more profits. So there are many ways that we see data as transforming this process and ultimately generating actual ROIs. We're seeing ROIs that are significant based on our, the cost of deploying our technology.
So that I want to get to some specifics right now, and please help me picture how your product works and how does it help, like in reality. Let's say that I'm at my house or in my apartment right now,
right.
And then you're offering me this product so I could install, use. Just walk me through what it is. Is a device? It's a number of devices. Is it, like you said, plug and play type of deal? What does it take to have this technology, and how does it work? And how does it how does it reflect? How does it show? How does it show numbers, or how does it send signals to me as a service manager to let me know that I had to take action before it breaks?
Great, a really good question. So the system has four major pieces. Right. So the first piece is a sensor. It's a device that simply plugs into the wall. I'll actually show you one. This is one of our sensors. So you simply plug that sensor in and it collects data. So that's the first piece. The second piece is that those devices, and let me back up. A building requires one of those sensors for roughly every 300 square feet. So a typical median-sized home in the US, 2,400 square feet, would be 8 sensors. In our customers, our typical single-family rental customers, we generally put 6 devices in a typical single-family rental home. In a multifamily application, we will typically put 2 to 3 sensors in a unit. So if it's a studio, there may be 2, a 1-bedroom might be 3, and so on. And it scales based on the size of the units. And we'll also put them in common spaces, typically in that one device every 300 square feet. Those devices communicate with a hub, with essentially a computer that collects the data from those devices. So very straightforward. It's an IoT architecture, an Internet of Things architecture. So you have the devices, you have the gateway. The gateway processes the data. It manages the intercommunications between the devices and the hub and the cloud, the internet. And so the second piece is that computer, it is assessing the data. It's actually running an algorithm, a set of algorithms. These algorithms learn the home. They are true artificial intelligence, AI, We call our brand of artificial intelligence ambient inference, which gets to your key question, how does it work? These sensors are collecting information about the environment. They're collecting the temperature, they're collecting the humidity, they're collecting the light level, they're collecting the indoor air quality, they're collecting electrical signals, they're collecting information about the building, and they're taking all of those streams of data into this computer, which is basically figuring out what's going on. There's a really great analogy one of my AI leads shared with me. Think about each of those sensors as a color of Play-Doh. Remember that, the toy when you're a kid, Play-Doh,
Yes.
right? So each one's a color. You have the red, you have the green, you have the blue. And then think about a child who mashes it all together, right? And when it's all mashed together, it just looks kind of like a blob of gray, because all the colors are mashed together. So what the AI is doing is it's actually taking that blob, all the signals it's receiving, and it's taking them apart and separating out the individual colors. How is the HVAC working? Is the toilet running? Is the air quality poor? Are the electrical signals indicating that there may be a problem because of a power failure or a lightning strike? And so all of those signals are being teased apart by the AI. And then the AI, the computer, sends information, Adrian, to the cloud, to the internet. It sends the temperature that it's receiving. It sends the humidity levels. It sends potentially noise levels. It sends the air quality. And it's then figuring out what alerts, what are the anomalies that tell you and your operations team what's going wrong so that you can act on them. The PTAC in apartment 103 is inefficient. It needs to be serviced. The temperature in apartment 305 is too high. The humidity in a home at 123 Main is high, and the temperature is low, and it's dark in the basement, and you might have mold. So the way the system is helping you is it's teasing out, it's pulling out those colors from the blob of signals, and it's then sending you alerts either through your email, text messages, or through a web dashboard that the maintenance teams can look at. And so they can actually then see what those alerts are telling them. They can even get maps of all the buildings and see which ones are working worse or better than others. And they can then use that information to triage, to optimize their maintenance processes. And that's how it works.
It's like a distillery for signals.
That's a different analogy. Yeah.
Or a brewery, right? But it's a very complex brewery, because you get your beer here, and then you get your spirits and your rum, your bourbon, yeah, and whiskey. You get everything you need, and it's everything on the dashboard, one dashboard.
Yeah, everything on the dashboard. So it's about delivering data over time as the system gets smarter and smarter, and we learn more and more, and work with people like you to say, okay, here are when we see these signals, it's going to tell us the following thing. And so we'll start to, as any AI system, will incorporate more and more of those expert knowledge into the system to be able to be more specific about what is going wrong. And that's the key advantage of a product like ours. It is plug and play. You simply just plug in those devices that I showed you. It's reasonably simple. It takes about 1 hour to set up a single family home entirely. It takes, in a multifamily, obviously it depends on the building, how complicated it is. But what is really unique about it is, unlike other products in this market, it's not just a leak detector or an electrical detector or an HVAC monitor. It's doing the whole home simultaneously.
That's fascinating, because I've seen products that do one thing or two things maybe, but not all of them. So
Right.
I can already see the potential in it. If it's gonna work the way it's supposed to, the way you describe it, this could be a significant hit for the industry, and like it could revolutionize the way we do maintenance. And I'm hoping it will, because we could use all the help that we could get with especially with the labor shortages that we have around. Not just that, but like it can be that expensive, and you gotta make up for the cost in like no time at all, just being able to prevent some catastrophic events.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Then we're rapidly approaching the wrap-up moment. We're not there quite yet, but I'd like to fire a couple of rapid questions at you, and just get some of your wisdom for our viewers.
Great.
So the first question that I have for you, it's a question that I ask all of the guests. What advice would you give a young person ready to enter the real world?
That is a really important question. So today's really quickly, I would say patience. Today's youth seem to want to find success right away. They're a bit impatient. They want to move up the corporate ladder. And I would stress to them that they should stay in roles where they could develop deep expertise, but also be willing to make mistakes. And so finally, I always say, if you find a boss who's willing to give you that freedom, lock onto it and savor it.
Excellent. The next one then is related to failure, right? We in society embrace, success. Everybody wants to be successful, but we're very seldom talk about, how did you get to become successful? And there's a lot of pain in a process. There's a lot of failure. So that the question that I have for you is, how did the failure or an apparent failure set you up for future success in your career?
Yeah, that one's easy. It's a great question. It's easy. So prior to starting SALIX, my first startup, I had actually landed my dream job. I was one of the top engineers in a telecom test equipment company. I was working with great people and I was working on great products. And I was actually hired by the CEO of the company to come in and bring new approaches, new processes to enable the company to scale. We had talked about scaling companies previously. So that was that's what I was brought in to do. And a management transition occurred after the CEO passed away unexpectedly. It was actually tragic for the company. And I wound up under a boss that didn't see eye to eye with my approach to engineering. And I was fired. I actually got fired from the job, which I had been very, very successful leading companies. I was one of the top engineers in the company. So yep, it's almost a cliche. This is almost a cliche. But there I was without a job, and really it gave me the motivation to start my first company. I'd always known I was gonna start a company someday, but there I was with no job and the opportunity in front of me.
That's a great story. That's an amazing story. Next question, Dan. In the last 3 years, what new belief, behavior, or habit has most improved your life?
Huh. Wow. It's not every day you get asked that question. All right. I think I'd like to take two angles here, if it's okay with you.
Sure, absolutely.
The first one actually was a completely different sort of behavior, a methodology for running a company. Previously, in terms of running my startups, I got a group of super smart people together and I put them in a room and we worked long hours and ate lots of pizza. And there was lots of collaboration. But when I started this company, I didn't think that was going to be possible, that there weren't as many of those kinds of people that I needed for this company in this region. And so I wound up actually creating a distributed and remote company where everybody was frankly all over the place, all over the world for that matter. And that was very different for me. And so interestingly, we started doing meetings on Zoom and on Teams before the pandemic. And so when the pandemic hit, and everybody switched to Zoom, we didn't miss a beat. We just, from the get-go, we had developed this methodology and it worked. And so we were able to make this organizational, shift. Because we had made this organizational shift, we adapted to COVID almost overnight. So that was the first thing. The second change actually occurred because of the pandemic. And obviously, I've been doing this a long time, and startups are hard. They're hard on the body, they're hard mentally, they're hard on the mind. And so I wanted to do something for my health. And so when the pandemic started, my daughter, who at the time moved back home, she was living in New York City and she moved in, she asked if I would be willing to run a 5K with her. Well, I had never run more than 100 yards. That was just not my thing. And I thought, oh my gosh. So we made a pact to run a 5K before the pandemic ended. We wound up running it within the first 6 months successfully. Interestingly, she had found a training program called From Couch to 5K, and I called it From Ouch to 5K. And so, but we ran our 5K, and I've been running it 2 or 3 times a week ever since. And so running has really changed my ability to focus. And frankly, it makes me feel good about the long hours because I know I'm doing something as well for my health.
Super inspirational, Dan. Thank you for sharing. Now, because we're really about to wrap things up right here, I do want to give you the opportunity to say something to the audience. For example, if there was something that you wish I would have asked, and you had an answer, and I didn't. If you wanna share with the audience how we could how they could contact you in case that they're interested in purchasing or doing a demo on your product, whatever you like to say in closing, by all means, please.
Well, first of all, Adrian, it's been an absolute pleasure talking to you this afternoon.
Likewise.
I really thoroughly enjoyed it, and I think we'll have more conversations to have after this one. I think the thing that, and you might have alluded it to, where are we as a company? That was a question that I thought would make a lot of sense. We are an early stage company. So the company is about 4 years old, but we just came out of stealth, really came into sort of, public eye in April. We are in a fundraising mode. We are right now developing the product, but we have successfully moved from the prototyping phase, from the development phase, into the what I'll call the pre-production phase, into the beta phase of our product. So we're really excited about it. It's been working very well so far. We have a long way to go, but it's been working very well. And if there are folks that would like to get more information about Dwellwell, you could find us on the web. There is a little bit of confusion. There is a dwellwell.com. That's not us. We are dwellwell.ai for our ambient inference. And you can find us at www.dwellwell.ai. And I would love to connect with anybody who'd be interested in connecting with me to learn more about the company.
Dan, thank you very much for coming to to visit us here at Multifamily Chronicles. It's been a great conversation. I wish we could have gone for longer. I always do that. It always ends up that we run out of time. Conversations are so fascinating to me. Thank you again. Thank you again for being a part of the program, for being here. I hope to get you back out here soon when you have some updates about your product, or there's new stuff developing in your world to share with the audience. I'd love to get you back out here.
Great. I'd love to do it. Thank you.
Everybody, thank you very much for watching us. This is Multifamily Chronicles. It's episode number 28. I'm Adrian Danila, your host, and I hope to see you back here soon. Have a great day.